Welcome to another edition of Our Awesome Authors. We have with us Gloria Holland, retired educator and author of memoirs. Today, we're dealing with memories, as in Bob Hope's Thanks for the Memories. And we shall share the story, the intriguing story of Gloria Holland, who grew up in Northern California, not too far from Crescent City and those sequoia trees way back then. And welcome aboard, Gloria.
Thank you.
You may have seen Gloria vicariously in the cast of some things in the Pentacle Theater.
A couple things.
She's been doing some things on and off. She has a little bit of a theatrical background, and she's very colorful in her own right. Well, so tell us a little bit about life in Acadia and what was it like growing up there?
Okay. Well, actually, I was born in Arcata, California, which is just stone's throw from Eureka, and moved. My family moved just before I turned 5, and we moved to Grants Pass, Oregon. Actually, it was a little community outside of Grants Pass called Jerome Prairie. And we lived there for 3 years, and when I was 8, we moved to Canby. And when I was 12, we moved to the farm, we call it the farm, that is just outside of Falls City. And I lived there until I moved away and went to college at 18.
You've moved around a lot of
And the tricky part of all of those moves is that my father and mother were dairy farmers, and so we had a herd of Jersey cows.
That was a move.
Yeah, that's right, the move. And we moved all of our increasingly large herd from place to place each time. So
you grew up as a dairy farm girl.
Yeah, I'm a farmer's daughter.
Of those various places you mentioned, the place at Grants Pass in Canby and Falls Church.
Falls City.
Falls City.
It's just about 30 miles.
Which
from
of
here.
those were the most wonderful place to live in, or which was the most upbeat?
That is really a difficult question to answer because every place
Has its own
was
identity.
wonderful in its own right and awful in its own right.
Okay,
Every
so
place.
You had a few speed bumps along the way.
Along the way, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. And you went to school where?
Well, I went to, I
High School,
started school in Jerome Prairie and then went from 3rd to 6th grade in Canby. And I went 2 years to school in Falls City, which is a tiny, tiny little village. And
That's
then,
the Lions on the other side.
No, it's west of Salem,
Right.
and it's west of Dallas, about
Yes, I
10 miles
remember.
west of Dallas,
Very
on the way
rural.
to Valsette's.
Very rural.
Very rural. And
Yeah.
then, and I went to the 7th and 8th grade there, and then transferred to Dallas Junior High and went 9 through 12 in Dallas.
So,
Graduated
any
Dallas.
of you people out there in Dallas, you remember this famous face there. So when did you graduate Dallas High School?
Oh, now I have
roughly?
to tell my age.
Well, approximately. What century?
We celebrated our 50th reunion last summer, so
Congratulations.
there you go.
Okay. Should be proud. Not everybody survived this long.
Well,
I'm
that's
sure some of the
true.
people have dropped out of your graduating class and have dropped off the face of the earth.
We've
let's-
lost a few, unfortunately.
So
yes.
let's thank heaven for little things.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Okay.
And
Now,
then I went on to the University of Oregon, graduated from there, and
majoring in?
sociology.
Okay, not in
and,
boys.
No, and then I
Yes.
got a master's degree from Western Oregon University. So that's my education background.
And then you were teaching at McKay High School and elsewhere.
I did. I started teaching at Whitaker Middle School. It just seems like 100 years ago. And I taught 7th and 8th grade there, English and social studies, and then I got my master's and I was transferred to McKay. So,
Do you think that you wrote this before or after you were a teacher of social studies?
oh, I wrote it after.
So what I'm going to ask you, and I want you to also get into the process of how one goes about writing. That's really important for our audience to understand, because they see the finished book, but they don't know all the nitty-gritty
Yeah.
that goes into it.
Mm-hmm.
To what degree did your being a teacher and assimilating different personalities and imparting knowledge and motivating people, to what degree do you think that influenced your career as a writer? Or your
My attempt to be
okay.
a writer.
Your endeavor as a writer.
My endeavor as a writer.
Yes. Is there a connection or a disconnect?
Well, I taught English for 30 years.
So
it was certainly one of the motivating factors because at one point, well, this is a memoir, and so it's a story of my life. And one of the first questions that I think anybody who wants to write the memoir is, who cares? Who's going to read this? And the second question is, can I write it? And I kind of thought, I don't know who's going to read it. I hope my family will be interested enough to read it. Fingers crossed. And then I thought, I did teach English for 30 years and I do know how to put a sentence together, so I thought, I can do it. And so I just sort of sat down and started to do it.
Good. Why don't we read some excerpts, part of a chapter, whatever. You start where you want. We don't have a script here. It's just all spontaneous.
Right.
So
Well, one of the things about memoir, and let me talk about the book a little bit.
The cover,
this is
the
a
cover.
self-published book, and when I finished writing it, and my husband is also very good at reading and editing and so forth, and so he helped me a lot. Alan. And so he was able to go through, and we, crossed all our T's and dotted all our I's and had it where we wanted it, and just simply took it to a printer in town. And they were able to print out copies of this, and I had many copies made of this, and then I just gave
how many
them away.
copies do you have?
I had 30 copies made.
Okay, and could you give us an idea of what the cost is, just in case?
It's about $20 a piece to have them
Okay.
in this format, and you could, you could do it for a lot cheaper.
It's important for people out there just to make sure their budget could absorb it and all.
Right, and you could do this for just a whole lot cheaper than I did. I chose to do this because it has, it has kind of a fancy cover and a picture, and it's all, every page is in color, and I mean, even the pictures, I have pictures which I don't expect anybody to be able to see.
It's almost a caption photograph album in a sense.
Right, and I can talk about that too.
Yes.
But so when I started to write it, can I just kind of talk about the process of how? So when
We're all ears, as Dumbo says.
When I started to write it, I really didn't know at the time that I could go on the internet, and there's just a lot of information out there on the internet. You just type in memoir writing and you can, they'll tell you how to do it. And I didn't know that, so I just thought, well, I have this story to tell, and that was the other thing I wanted to tell you, was that my story is really, to me, it's really not very interesting, because I led really something of an idyllic life. I mean, I was a farm girl in Falls City, and I grew up to be a teacher, and my parents weren't alcoholics, and I wasn't beaten, and nobody went to jail, and there was none of that drama. I mean, it was I was just this little farm girl, and I thought, well, it's kind of a boring story, but it's my story. And so I thought, well, it's kind of important to get that story written down, because I have grandchildren now, and I think that's one of the motivating factors for this whole project. And I thought, I look at these little kids and I think, their childhood is nothing like mine was. It's completely different. I mean, I have a 2-year-old grandson who gets a telephone, and he does these little games on the telephone. We didn't even have, a telephone like that. So their childhood is so different. So I thought, well, I'm just going to go ahead and write it. And when I sat down to write it without anybody telling me what to do, I thought, well, the first thing I'll do is I'm just going to make a list of places I've lived and jobs that I've had. And then I thought, well, maybe I should kind of explain why I'm writing this. So I just started typing. And it all just kind of poured out of me.
Yes.
It was just, you know, once I got started, once I just did it, it was just an amazing process. It just kind of came pouring out of me. So I started with sort of some background, my parents and their families, and I talked a little bit about their families, and I started digging into some photographs, and I, you know, started thinking maybe I should incorporate some photographs in this. And then I started to divide it into some very natural chapters because my parents had moved around so much. Like every 3 or 4 years, they packed up the cows and all the furnishings, and they, you know, into a truck, and we got in the truck and we, you know, moved into a new house.
Half cow will travel.
Exactly. And so I was able to divide it into those chapters of where we lived. So you asked me to read a little bit, and I wanted to give a little bit of background.
You want to give us a little preface about why you chose the part that you're
so,
with
well,
the audience?
I thought it needed to be short, so this is a short one. We were living in Jerome Prairie, just south of Grants Pass at the time, in an old farmhouse that had a big lawn, and on this lawn there was a very, very large tree. And I was probably maybe 6 when this story takes place, and it's about my brother. I only had one brother. He's deceased now, but I only had one brother, and it's about him and a cousin of ours, and it's called "We'll Shoot the Sun Out."
We'll shoot the sun
We'll
out.
shoot the sun out. Throughout my childhood, it was not uncommon to host a visiting relative or two, especially during the summer. Our cousin, Jean Jr., whom everyone referred to as Penny, stayed with us for a while during the summer when I was 6. Randy and Penny were only months apart in age, so the 2 boys would have been about 12. Penny was the son of my father's next youngest brother, Jean Sr. At 12, Penny was tall, thin, blonde, and really very nice. But when 2 12-year-old boys get together, the most fun they can have is to torment their younger sister. One day, while I was playing in the front yard, I noticed Randy and Penny standing by a large tree alongside the driveway. They had a BB gun and were taking turns pointing the gun skyward and shooting. I ran to them and innocently asked what they were doing. Looking peevishly at each other, Penny replied, "We're shooting the sun out." "Yeah, we're going to shoot the sun out." I was shocked. I was terrified. "You can't shoot the sun out. You can't do that." "Oh, yes, we can. Just you watch."
Bravado.
And they continued pointing upward and shooting and laughing. I argued with them for a time as they continued to laugh and shoot. It didn't take long before I began to sob. I ran into the house and told my mother that Randy and Penny were outside and they were going to shoot the sun out with their BB gun. Mom listened to my rather absurd accusation and explained to me that it was impossible to shoot the sun out with a BB gun, or with anything else for that matter. But I was inconsolable and continued to sob. Mom put her rolling pin on the counter, grabbed my hand, and stormed out of the house. "Are you boys telling Tootie that you're shooting the sun out?" "Well, yeah," they snorted and laughed. "You can't tell her that. She's just a child, for God's sake. Give me that gun. Now you two get out of here and quit teasing your sister." It took a while for me to calm down, but I finally believed my mom and felt safe that the sun would survive my brother's threat. While Randy and Penny didn't suffer any further reprimand that I'm aware of, they stopped teasing me so badly after that. Knowing my brother, I'm now convinced that he really did understand that it didn't feel good to be teased, and he took more care to be kind to me in the future.
Great ending, good. Yeah, that actually addresses the whole business of bullying in a very poignant way.
Oh.
Thank you for that wonderful, inspirational story. Sometimes you have to be in the valley to appreciate the peaks ahead of you and life's horizon. That's sort of my formula for dealing with life and all.
Well, one of the things you just mentioned was that it deals with the issue of bullying, and I did that quite intentionally because my grandchildren, who I hope will read it someday, are all, at this time, they're all 7 and under. And they're going into that stage in their lives, and they're going to be experiencing either personally or they'll be witnessing some bullying. And I wanted to have an expression of kindness and see that people can be kind.
I understand that there's something probably on the internet called the Phoenix Project.
Yeah.
And they have skits with young people, teenagers involved, that try to discourage bullying and show how you could empower bystanders to resist the bully and diminish the act of. And
I think that a lot of the schools today are really doing a commendable job of addressing that issue. You know, I'm not sure that it's all going to go away, but
the Leslie School is over here. It's a middle school in town. They have a gentleman named Pete Teller as a counselor there, and he's running a program that is patterned after a success story in Norway, as I understand it. Maybe sometimes he's written a book, or maybe just a generic program. We could have him explain that, and maybe some of the. It's a very important thing. I wonder whether, this is just a sideline, I wonder whether schoolyard bullies grow up to be bossy bullies in the workplace, and some of them ultimately graduate to tyrants in charge of states and countries and all.
Oh, I'm sure. Absolutely.
So I don't know how much we do of bully tracking their early days. Tell me, are bullying records expunged so that if somebody, if the police wanted to, or a psychiatrist to find out what kind of track record a given person had in middle school, that they would be denied access? You know, I don't know. I don't know. Just a question. I mean, it's a question for the Women's Crisis Center and others to deal with, and Human Rights Commission and all. Okay. Once you wrote it, who were the people you read this to share it with in the beginning, and what kind of feedback, Gloria, did you receive? I actually sent it to some cousins of mine. I tried to send it to everybody who I had mentioned one way or another. And this memoir only takes me through college. I haven't dealt with my adult life yet. Sequel.
Yeah, I'm going to do it. But
from legacy to prophecy.
For what? From legacy to prophecy? Possibly. But you know, it was really well received. I was very, very pleased with the reception. You know, there are some issues in memoir writing that I think that I would like to address. And
go for it.
Yeah, I think, you know, I would encourage anybody who wants to leave a legacy, and I actually did title this Legacy. I really encourage you. It doesn't make any difference how well or poorly you think you write. That's just not an issue.
From the heart is what
Everybody has a story, and that story should get written down for our children and grandchildren.
I quite agree.
And one of the pitfalls in writing your truth in your legacy is that you really could offend. You could hurt people. And I think people need to be cautious about the stories they choose to tell and the way they choose to tell them. And I can give you a little bit of an example. I wrote in this memoir about a time when one of my cousins had been kicked out of her home. She was 16 years old, and she ended up on our doorstep. And she was the same age as my brother as well. And I think they were about 16 at the time. And we were living in Canby. We had a terrible living situation. My mother was working extremely hard. Her life was very difficult at that time. And here comes this cousin. And she didn't have anywhere to go. So my mom called another relative, and the cousin ended up going to live with this other relative. And I said in my memoir that my mother had a very strong opinion about teenage children who, like my brother and my cousin, you know, were the same age, not sleeping in the same room. And when I said that, and I sent it off, my cousin took offense because I think she thought that I was pointing an accusatory finger at her. And I certainly was not. That didn't even enter my mind. And so when I found out that she was offended, I had to kind of backpedal a little bit, because what I really was trying to get at was that I think my mother had issues.
Your cousin was reading something into it that wasn't there because of her own sensitivities.
Yeah, and I wasn't
That's how
really
I see it.
aware of it. But my mother had issues, and I was not clear enough, I guess, on that. So that was the only real time that I got feedback that was, you know, like, oh,
So
no, that's not what I
did you
intended.
expunge that from the book, or you kept it
No,
in there?
well, it was after the book had already been printed, and so it's there.
You don't go around and give everybody a pre-copy to edit.
No, I didn't do that.
Because that would be unfair to you, probably.
I didn't do that.
Okay, but at least it expresses where you are.
And you know, and it opened some dialogue, and so we were able to have a conversation, you know, about my mother and this cousin was very
Was your
close
mother
to me.
still alive when the book was published?
Mom and Dad are both deceased.
So your mother didn't have an opportunity for feedback?
No.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
that would have been nice.
Are you serious about writing a sequel?
Yes, I am. As a matter of fact, I taught, I don't want to say taught, I facilitated a class, did you know that, last year?
And write your own story?
Yeah, write your own story.
Yeah, in the church.
Yeah, at my church and at our church. And it was, I think it was fairly well received. And so I haven't had the opportunity to do it again, so I'm thinking that I might like to offer it again so that I will have more opportunity myself to write some more. Yeah.
Okay. Have you been to any of the memoirs writing classes in either the library or Center 50 Plus? Because I think both of them have writers groups.
Yeah.
The Wednesday is the Center 50 Plus at 1 o'clock, and the Plaza Room of the library serves as host to the writers yesterday, today, and tomorrow group. 12:30. It's a pretty big group, actually.
I encourage everybody to go to those.
Okay.
I went to one once in Independence, and it just became inconvenient for me to go back. But
Let me make a
great
suggestion.
class.
Not everybody out there in our TV audience is a writer. We know that by definition. But you all have stories to tell. So my suggestion, food for thought, would be to tape record your story. Just use a little microphone and a tape recorder and put it together, edit it if you will, and then bring it to somebody you know who is a writer, or collaborate with them in some way. You might even go to a local college and find out if there's a gifted student who likes to write and would collaborate with you and put it all together and see what comes about. Actually, there are probably quite a few English majors or other students who are good writers and would love the opportunity to work with you and put it together and launch their own writing career, and you will be their first success story. So go for it. Also, I think it's a great way to have the generations working together. I'm going to take this opportunity to share something that I did back in the 1980s. The scenario is Jamaica, Queens, New York, where I had my first job after school with after a master's degree. It was a senior center launched, Rochdale Village Senior Center in Queens. And I learned that a lot of the elder residents there in Rochdale were refugees or immigrants, mainly from Europe, a few from the West Indies and all. And so I wrote a grant proposal to have a certain foundation give us money to hire student journalists from the local high school and college. And then we paired them together, the elder immigrants and the student. And it really was like living history for these students.
Absolutely.
Because they had never really known what it was like to be in another country and interview somebody from that generation. And we had all kinds of beautiful stories. I still have what's called the Ellis Island Digest. And to give it some extra flavor, we had the late Congressman Joe Adabo of Ozone Park, Queens, write the preface. It gave it some, on his stationery, added mileage. And it was a very beautiful thing. And I remember there was one lady named Helen who had grown up, or she had been, just avoided the Holocaust, the slaughter of Jews in her native Czechoslovakia. But I don't know if she was in a concentration camp. I think she was, but she was freed before at the end of the war. And she never really had the guts or gumption to want to share the story with her daughter directly. But she somehow wanted to communicate it. So we got her to be interviewed by the student, I would think was Chiquita MacArthur from York College. And it so happens that about 2 weeks before the Ellis Island Digest was published, she died. So her daughter read about her secondhand. This was a way she didn't really have to face her daughter. But it was a bittersweet turn of events, the Ellis Island Digest. I hope maybe at some time that we could get students here to interview immigrant elderly. Also with July 4th coming up shortly, it might be interesting to do stories on senior citizens who grew up in different parts of the country, and that could be a social studies lesson of having students here learn about what growing up elsewhere in the country is all about. You as a former social studies teacher can weigh in on that possibility.
You know,
I don't want to put you in the spot.
Well, you would have to, you know, approach the school district and see if that's a possibility to get that project going into the schools. It sounds wonderful.
Food for thought. New superintendent will be taken up shortly. Was it Christopher Perry is the new superintendent?
No,
Christy.
Yeah,
Christy Perry. Okay, Christy Perry. Hope I'll meet you for coffee one day. We can talk about it if you're in the mood. Thanks and welcome from Dallas to Salem. We look forward to your tenure. Anyway, this is Lee Coyne with another edition of our Awesome Authors. Signing off, welcoming you to share your stories, your memoirs, and write to me, luckycoin@yahoo.com, with your ideas for future authors. And we'll see you soon. Take care and read a good book to keep happy. Thank you.